Miyamura is a lonely loser with no friends who stays as quiet as an NPC until he somehow befriends the school's most popular girl. However, when he shows him his globe and 6 inches of plot twist, she turns into an obedient housewife in hopes of getting clapped by him. It all starts when Professor Yasuda tells his students to make the most of their summer vacation because they'll be studying for college exams next year. He encourages them to go to the beach and says he'll come along too, but a student named Toru boldly says no one wants to go to the beach with their teacher. After class, Yuki admits Yasuda is pretty hot if he quits yapping, and Ori says at least he's a good teacher. She then reveals she ran into him in the hallway, and he told her not to worry about being flat because he'd still tap. Yuki then tells Ori that a guy from another school wanted her contact info, but Ori says no because if he didn't have the balls to ask on his own, he should touch some grass instead of girls. Toru then suggests they hit up a karaoke place, but Ori tells them to go without her. Just then, a guy named Miyamura passes by and hands her the phone she just dropped. After he leaves, the group comments that he's always so reserved and assumes he must goon to busty goth mommies. They ask Toru if he knows anything about Miyamura, but he is as clueless as the next guy. Just then, Ori looks at her phone and sprints home, making them wonder if she got a pickup call from her secret boyfriend. When she gets home, she turns on the vacuum and starts cleaning. Following that, she picks up her brother Sota from school, and as she walks home, she sees girls of her age living hot girl summers while she lives tired wife Tuesdays. Later, as she takes care of the laundry, Sota arrives with blood coming out of his nose, much to her shock. As she tends to him, the guy who brought him home decides to take his leave, but Sota grabs onto his shirt. Ori then asks him to stay for a while so she can properly thank him for taking care of her brother. Later, he explains that Sota fell because a dog barked at him, but he's a smart kid because he quickly told him his name and address. He then calls Ori by her name and says he's impressed at her householding skills, which shocks her. She asks him how he knows her name.
Are you being serious right now? I'm Miyamura and we're in the same class.
Wait. What?
The next day, Ori is still in disbelief and keeps glaring at Miyamura because he looks way different in school. Unable to resist, she walks up to the guy and asks him to come over to her place again because Sota has grown a liking to him. He promises to pick a picture book on the way, but Ori says he doesn't have to. Miyamura is shocked that Ori is still talking to him because he was certain she'll avoid him after yesterday. Ori admits she was blown away at first, but then she realized she's pretty much the same, so it didn't matter. When Miyamura thanks her with a smile, she tells him to get rid of that haircut and those glasses so he can finally get some shotties on his ding-dong. However, Miyamura says he has a lot of piercings, and he uses his hair to hide them. Later at Ori's place, she learns that Miyamura is not that much of an otaku. His family runs a cake shop and he used a safety pin to give himself piercings some years ago. On top of that, he barely gets a passing grade while Ori herself scores straight A's. As they look into a grocery magazine, Ori realizes that Miyamura has pretty eyes and his eyelashes are very long. She then diverts the topic, saying there is a discount on eggs, and she'll get there before 4 p.m. to avail the offer. However, she's called to the AV room after the last class, so she forces Miyamura to do her bidding. The guy then runs to the store by jumping the school fence over Yuki and manages to grab the eggs in time. At night, he tells Ori that he ran into Yuki on the way, but she didn't recognize him because he wasn't wearing his glasses. Ori mindlessly says she doesn't want anyone else to see that side of him, but then becomes conscious and leaves to get some drinks. To make her feel better, Miyamura says he also doesn't want others to see her in her housewife mode. Ori gets nervous and shoves the glass in his face, frantically telling him to think before speaking. While blushing, she wonders how Miyamura can say such things with a straight face and starts calling him a dummy repeatedly. Miyamura then explains that while he still likes seeing her in school, he prefers seeing her in an apron because it awakens something primal inside him. Days later, Miyamura arrives feeling uneasy, revealing that their upcoming PE class will involve swimming. At first, Ori does not understand why he is so stressed, but then Miyamura lifts his shirt, revealing that his body is covered in tattoos. Although they soon find out that swimming is optional, Miyamura remains anxious and his worries only grow further. While they chat on the class balcony, Toru and Yuki observe from a distance and wonder when and how these two became friends. After Ori leaves, Toru starts a conversation with Miyamura, casually asking if he and Ori are dating. Miyamura quickly denies it, saying they are just friends and wouldn't even make a good couple. Toru is still curious and asks more questions, prompting Miyamura to tease him by asking if he has a crush on Ori. To his surprise, Toru openly admits that he does like her, making Miyamura realize why Toru always seems so fixated on her during class. As they process this, another student reminds them that PE is about to start. In the changing room, Miyamura puts on his winter uniform instead of gym clothes, which confuses Toru. Sensing his suspicion, Miyamura finally decides to show Toru his tattoos and makes him promise to keep it a secret. Toru is initially shocked but soon understands why Miyamura always wears long sleeves, even in the heat. Out of curiosity, Toru moves Miyamura's bangs aside and is even more surprised to see multiple hidden piercings. Later, he asks why Miyamura doesn't embrace this side of himself, and Miyamura admits he got the tattoos and piercings on a whim. Their conversation shifts to Ori, and Toru asks how Miyamura became close to her. Miyamura explains that it all started when he walked her younger brother, Sota, home one day, which led to them spending more time together. Wanting to be upfront, Toru asks if Miyamura is okay with him confessing to Ori. Miyamura has no objections, saying the decision is up to Ori. Later, Toru gets scolded by Yuki for skipping the gym, while Miyamura casually mentions to Ori that he and Toru had a conversation. However, as he walks ahead, Ori asks why he is avoiding him, but Miyamura cannot bring himself to explain. Before she can ask further, Toru suddenly requests to meet Ori after school, leaving before she can respond. Ori plans to pick up Sota, but Miyamura offers to do it so Toru can talk to her. That evening, Toru confesses to Ori in class while Miyamura watches over Sota. When Ori returns, Miyamura braces to die a virgin like y'all, but she asks if he truly believes they are not suited to be a couple. Miyamura, caught off guard, explains that he sees himself as dull and unworthy of her. Frustrated, Ori tears up and scolds him for assuming things without asking her. Her emotions turn into anger, and she jokingly threatens to crush his walnut if he ever avoids her again, making Miyamura realize how much she truly cares. She then tells him that she turned Toru down, and when Miyamura says he's a nice guy, she suggests he dates him instead. A few days later, Miyamura helps Ori carry groceries, and as they chat, she absent-mindedly starts singing anime songs. Miyamura compliments her voice, but she immediately gets embarrassed and stops, insisting she only knows the lyrics because her brother plays the same CDs on repeat. Later, Ori gets a surprise visit from her mom, Yuriko. That evening, her little brother Sota excitedly talks about Miyamura, explaining how he often comes over to hang out with him. Yuriko is intrigued and asks if Miyamura is cute, but Ori defines him as a dark villain in detective movies. When Yuriko asks for his full name, Ori panics, realizing she doesn't even know his first name. The next day at school, Ori becomes obsessed with figuring out Miyamura's first name, but refuses to ask him directly, afraid she'll seem too interested. She tries eavesdropping in the locker room, but her creeping around just gets her called a weirdo. That evening, she even checks the list of top students, hoping to find his full name, but no luck. When she tries asking Toru, he immediately runs off because he's wiping tears from her rejection. Ori finally realizes that if Miyamura introduces himself to her mom, she'll finally learn his full name, so she invites him over. The next day, Miyamura visits and Yuriko welcomes him in because Ori and Sota went out to run errands. Soon after, Sota comes back, and Yuriko leaves him in Miyamura's care before heading off to work. When Ori returns, she realizes her mom totally sets her up, sending her out just to give Miyamura alone time with her at their house. As they talk, Miyamura mentions that Yuriko politely calls him by his first name. Ori immediately jumps on the opportunity and asks him to repeat exactly what she said. He notes that she's been acting weird and even teases her about sneaking around the locker room, asking if she was getting excited over seeing hot guys. Left with no other choice, Ori admits everything and Miyamura bursts out laughing, realizing Ori has been acting like a moron just to learn his first name. Miyamura then writes his full name, Isumi Miyamura, on a piece of paper and hands it to her. Feeling victorious, Ori tries calling him Isumi, but immediately gets flustered and decides to stick with his last name for now. She then asks if he knows her first name, only to find out he's known it is Kyoko Ori the whole time. She feels let down and gets angry at first, but when Miyamura starts laughing, she laughs with him. The next day, Student Council President Sengoku and member Sakura ask Ori for help with their tasks. She agrees, but they immediately dump a mountain of work on her. That evening, Yuki notices how exhausted Ori looks and worries that the student council is taking advantage of her. Ori just shrugs it off, saying she doesn't mind as long as she's useful. Meanwhile, Toru and Miyamura watch from afar and agree to stay out of it. However, Miyamura casually jokes that maybe Ori is doing all this extra work because she has a secret crush on Sengoku. Just then, a girl named Ayasaki walks in, and Ori hands her some books. After Ayasaki leaves, Toru comments that she's cute, but Yuki reveals she's actually Sengoku's girlfriend. However, instead of helping out, she basically acts as the student council's mascot. Ori then reveals the work she just returned to Ayasaki was actually her responsibility, meaning the council has been offloading Ayasaki's tasks onto Ori. Annoyed but used to it, Ori heads home, and Miyamura decides to bake her a cake to cheer her up. Later, Miyamura bumps into Ayasaki, who drops a bunch of books and starts yapping like a Karen. She hurriedly picks them up and runs off, accidentally leaving one behind. Miyamura calls after her, but she tells him to just throw it away. Curious, he checks it and realizes it's the student council's budget report. That night, despite being extremely exhausted, Ori stays up all night working. The next morning, Miyamura arrives at school and finds a crowd gathered outside their class. Ori and Toru tell him that Ayasaki has blamed Ori for losing the budget report. Even though Ori insists she didn't lose anything, Sengoku immediately takes his girlfriend's side and demands an apology. Miyamura, knowing the truth, steps in and tells Ori,
Don't have to apologize. Ori, you don't owe them a thing. Mr. President?
What the hell do you think you're doing?
Is this the report that went missing? It was left behind in the hall yesterday. Ayasaki said I should trash it because it wasn't important.
Realizing she's been caught, Ayasaki bursts into tears, admitting that she totally forgot about it in a hurry. Sengoku and the others finally apologize to Ori, but she brushes it off, knowing they are just doing their jobs. Later, Ori thanks Miyamura for backing her up. Miyamura then asks why she even tolerates Sengoku, and Ori explains that they've known each other for years. Back then, Sengoku used to be super timid, and Ori used to bully him relentlessly. One day, he finally snapped and threatened to expose her if she didn't stop. After that, she eased up and even started helping him with small tasks as a weird sort of truce. The next day, Miyamura runs into Sengoku in the locker room and quickly realizes that after getting headbutted, Sengoku is now terrified of him. During PE, Miyamura and Toru play table tennis while brainstorming what to get Ori for her upcoming birthday. They play for hours but still don't come up with a good idea. Meanwhile, at home, Sota excitedly talks about spending time with Miyamura every day during spring break. However, Ori warns him that Miyamura will probably visit less often as time goes on. Sota then asks if Miyamura will stop visiting completely in the future, and Ori suddenly realizes how lonely she'd feel if he were no longer around. A few days later, Miyamura visits on Ori's birthday. Sota gives her a drawing, while Miyamura gifts her a CD of all the latest popular songs. The thoughtful gift makes Ori emotional because it's exactly what she wanted. As they celebrate, they realize spring break is ending soon, and soon they'll be starting their final year of school together. One day, the teacher told everyone to pair up for an activity, but Miyamura ended up alone. The teacher encouraged the students to include him, but they all treated him like he stands Taylor Swift and says One Piece gets better after 300 episodes. This kept happening for years, making Miyamura feel like life had it out for him. So in a fit of frustration, he went home and gave himself some piercings, hoping it would make him look cooler. In his next school, people still thought he was strange, but then Ori, the popular girl, walked up to him and casually said hi. She pointed out that while everyone thought he was some dark and mysterious loner, he actually seemed pretty normal to her. And just like that, their story kicked off. On the first day of their third year, students crowd around the notice board to check their class placements. Ori feels excited to see she's in class 1 with Yuki. And to her mild surprise, Miyamura and Toru are there too. Soon after, the whole squad, including an anime version of Jacksepticeye named Shu, gathers and starts yapping, and Miyamura realizes he's actually part of a group now. Later, when the teacher tells them to form groups of 4, Miyamura braces himself to be left out again, but before he can react, Ori, Yuki, and Toru sit down with him naturally. While hanging out on the rooftop, Miyamura starts wondering if he can actually call these people his friends. Toru shows up and casually mentions that their next class has been changed from math to economics. He grumbles about how annoying schedule changes are and starts rambling about something else. Miyamura spaces out so hard that when Toru asks for his opinion, he has no clue what they're even talking about. Out of nowhere, Miyamura asks Toru what he really thinks of him. Toru bluntly says that his whole wannabe Sasuke Uchiha act is kind of annoying, but then admits that Miyamura is actually too nice for his own good, which makes Toru feel like he has to look out for him. Also, he's mad that Miyamura looks more smashable than most of the girls at school when he ties his hair up. However, Toru makes it clear that even though he's weird, they're still friends. Later, Ori scolds them for not finishing their report. When she asks what they were doing instead, Toru casually says they were bonding. The next day, Toru and Miyamura run into each other at the lockers, and Toru realizes they still aren't even on a first-name basis. Meanwhile, Sota wakes her up early, begging her to drop him off at school. Since she arrives at her own school way too early, she ends up chatting with Ayasaki. They talk about Miyamura, and Ayasaki playfully suggests that he and Ori look like a couple. Ori immediately denies it, saying they're just friends. Seizing the opportunity, Ayasaki asks if she can have Miyamura slap her kitty. And despite just denying any feelings, Ori suddenly gets possessive. Before things can escalate, two other girls walk into the cafe, and Ori makes a swift exit. That evening, Ori realizes that since her brother is always busy, she and Miyamura spend a lot of time alone together. They decide to watch a horror movie and Ori sits there unhinged, while Miyamura nearly has a heart attack at every jump scare. When the lights suddenly go out, he full-on panics, convinced a ghost is coming for him. The lights flicker back on, and Ori, amused, puts on another horror movie. As she swaps the disc, Miyamura randomly remembers how Yuki once pointed out that Ori's fingers are double-jointed. One time, Yuki and Ori compared hand sizes, and when Toru tried to touch her hand, Ori flat-out refused and told him to touch some grass instead. Thinking about that, Miyamura and Ori start comparing their hands, and before she knows it, she absent-mindedly grabs his. Then, out of nowhere,
I like you. Your hands!
Miyamura starts playing along and says he loves her hands too. The two are about to unlock each other's DLC, only for Sota to come home and unknowingly ruin it. Miyamura takes him to the bath, and the two just wash their hands in awkward silence. The next day, Ayasaki tells Sakura about her conversation with Ori, admitting she was just joking about tapping Miyamura and didn't expect Ori to react so seriously. Toru, who has been eavesdropping, overhears and immediately starts overthinking. Later, Miyamura shows up to class with a massive bruise on his face but refuses to explain. Ori, not one to let things go, pesters him until he admits he got into a fight with Toru. She's ready to scold Toru, thinking he took it too far, but then Toru walks in, looking worse than your mom after a night out at the club. Later, Yuki asks what happened and Miyamura casually explains that he dodged every punch except the first one. Toru, stubborn as ever, kept trying to hit him, which just led to Miyamura knocking him down over and over. Meanwhile, Ori tries to talk to Toru, but he just complains about getting beaten up. Last night, the fight started because Toru confronted Miyamura about Ori's feelings for him. Miyamura kept brushing it off like it wasn't a big deal, so Toru lost patience and tried using force to get an answer. In the end, they both realize how dumb it is, and Toru admits he took it too far. Later, Yuki and Ori talk about how both guys admit it was their own fault, but when Ori asks what the fight was about, Yuki decides to keep it a secret. Meanwhile, Miyamura finds Toru sulking on the rooftop, ready to finally make peace. A few days later, Toru is walking to school when a bunch of papers suddenly rain down on him. He looks up and sees Sakura leaning out of a classroom window, panicking because her reports just took flight. He picks them up and returns them to her, and she thanks him for the help. Curious, he asks how she handles all the student council responsibilities, and she admits Remy and Sengoku always have her back. Later, Miyamura surprises Toru with ice cream, mentioning that Ori got it for them. Toru's excitement dies fast when he realizes it's melon-flavored, which is his least favorite. Not wanting to waste it, he and Miyamura run into Sengoku and immediately bully him into eating it instead. As Sengoku takes a bite, they all start arguing about whose tongue matches the ice cream color the most. Toru is too cool for their foolery and roasts them for acting like morons. To get back at him, they tease him for having a tongue that can make a woman curl her feet, and Sengoku threatens to tell Sakura about it. Toru asks who that even is, and Sengoku explains she's the green-haired student council girl with giant mommy milkers. Naturally, this leads to Toru and Miyamura clowning on him for always being surrounded by shotties, but Sengoku insists it's all professional. When they start complaining about the summer heat, Sengoku takes pity on them and allows them to use the air conditioner in the student council room. The next day, Toru and the others take full advantage, chilling in the cool student council room. At some point, Ori and Miyamura leave to grab drinks, and while waiting, Aosaki casually asks Toru if those two are dating. Caught off guard, Toru hesitates to answer because he knows it's not that simple. When she says Toru looks better with Horo, Yuki shuts it down, claiming he can't score Ori if he was packing 6 inches. Meanwhile, Sakura watches Toru a little too closely and realizes that something is going on here. She jokes that Miyamura might be exploring Ori's Cave of Wonders, sending Toru into immediate panic mode. By the time they finally return, Toru is visibly on edge, spiraling into worst-case scenarios. Miyamura notices and tries to explain their delay, but Toru, not wanting to hear it, slaps his hands over his ears and refuses to listen. Seeing his reaction, the others take the chance to mess with him, throwing out increasingly ridiculous and suggested comments until Toru frantically pops open his drink.
What? Why is it exploding?
Grumbling about his misfortune, he's suddenly handed a cloth by Sakura, who casually explains that their delay had nothing to do with his delusions. In reality, Miyamura just dropped his cola, and they had to clean up the mess. That evening, Miyamura is at Ori's house helping with homework when she mentions her air conditioner is broken. Without thinking, Miyamura shrugs and says he just sleeps bare in the heat. The room goes silent as Ori processes what he just said, then eyes him suspiciously. She blurts out that he totally seems like the type to strip without hesitation, much like your mom, and then demands to see his tattoos. Without even questioning it, Miyamura starts unbuttoning his shirt, which only annoys her more. Determined to fluster him for once, she starts throwing out absurd and suggestive scenarios, but Miyamura is unfazed and hits her with a frustrated. She complains about how he's always so calm, while she starts to get moist just by looking into his pretty eyes. Seeing she's actually self-conscious, Miyamura offers that he'll share something that makes him nervous too. He tells her about meeting up with his old friend, Shindo, and as the two started talking, the guy assumed Miyamura was going over to Ori's place to give her back shots. No matter how many times Miyamura denied it, Shindo refused to let it go, teasing him until he actually got flustered. At the time, he brushed it off, but now, every time someone suggests he and Ori are dating, he can't help but get that same nervous feeling. As he finishes, he gets a call from Shindo, who sends him a picture of him and his girlfriend, suggesting a double date. Without hesitation, Miyamura deletes the message before Ori can see, then calls Shindo, curses him out, and immediately hangs up. Watching him react so strongly, Ori realizes that, despite how close they'd gotten, there's still so much she doesn't know about his past. The next day, Ori is walking home from a grocery run when she unexpectedly runs into Shindo. Meanwhile, Miyamura and Toru see this from a distance. Without warning, Miyamura speeds up, and to Toru's horror, slaps Shindo across the face. Unbothered, Shindo just laughs it off, and Miyamura introduces him to the group, revealing that he's actually a second-year student who got held back. They all end up at a restaurant, where Miyamura reminisces about how they met. Years ago, Miyamura was a total loner until one day Shindo, who couldn't even remember his name, started talking to him. That small conversation led to them bonding over a favorite singer. Even when his friends warned him that Miyamura looked like the type who gooned to thick goth mommies, Shindo ignored them and stuck around. Thanks to him, that era wasn't as miserable as it could have been for Miyamura. Thinking about it, Miyamura realizes school isn't bad either because of Ori. The next day, Ori comes down with a fever which freaks Sota out. When she tries to get ready for school anyway, he forces her back into bed, pleading with her not to die while he's gone. After taking medicine, she falls into a restless sleep, dreaming about all the times her mom left for work when she needed her most. When she wakes up, she sees Miyamura sitting by her side, who rushed over as soon as Sota said she was dying. He reassures her before standing to leave, but she weakly asks why he's abandoning her. Confused, Miyamura tells her he was just going to the kitchen for water. Realizing she's feeling fragile, he takes her hand and promises to stay as long as she wants. Thinking she's asleep,
Also, I'm in love with you, Hori. Have been for a while. If you need anything, call or text me.
the moment he's gone, Ori bolts upright with her eyes wide open and can't believe he actually confessed. At that moment, she does not know what to do, so she decides to pretend that she was sleeping the entire time so they can stay as they are for a little longer. The next morning, Ori decides she's just not in the mood to deal with school, so she fakes being sick and stays home, using the time to think about Miyamura's confession. As she replays the moment over and over in her head, Sota barges in and tells her that he saw Miyamura hanging out with some girl. That alone is enough to make Ori's mind spiral into all sorts of unnecessary scenarios, but she decides to keep calm and not jump to conclusions. However, when Sota casually throws in the fact that they were arm in arm, it suddenly feels like all logic goes flying out the window. That night, she sits on her bed, phone in hand, debating whether or not to text Miyamura and just ask him directly, but then she decides it's easier to stay a lonely virgin. The next day, when she walks into class, Toru immediately approaches her and tells her that Miyamura has been really worried about her. Instead of feeling reassured, she just feels even more conflicted, so she avoids the problem entirely. She picks a seat far from Miyamura and pretends she doesn't notice his glances. Later, when class ends, Toru casually mentions to Miyamura that Ori seemed tense and kind of distant, almost like she was deliberately ignoring him. Miyamura, of course, already knows exactly why she's acting this way but just shrugs it off. After school, Ori sneaks into a locked room where she's sure she won't be found, but Miyamura catches her in the act almost immediately. She panics and tries to make a quick getaway, but he suddenly asks if she had been awake that time when he whispered that he loved her. The unexpected question makes her freeze, but instead of answering, she asks him about the girl he was hanging out with. Miyamura immediately asks if she's talking about Chika, completely ruining her plan of making him look confused. Now that she has a name, she gets even more worked up, thinking that Miyamura is actually dating this mysterious girl. However, Miyamura quickly clears things up by explaining that Chika is actually Shindo's girlfriend, and the whole arm-holding thing was because she tripped and sprained her ankle, so he just helped her walk. Ori, now fully realizing she overreacted, turns red from embarrassment, throws books at him, and runs away in embarrassment. When she gets home, she starts feeling guilty about how she acted and assumes that both Miyamura and Toru must think she's some kind of violent maniac. Before she can wallow in regret for too long, Miyamura shows up at her house to return the books she threw at him. Ori, now speaking hesitantly, makes it obvious that she feels bad, and Miyamura quickly picks up on it. They both awkwardly apologize at the same time, clearing up the misunderstanding once and for all. As their conversation naturally shifts, Miyamura admits that he had been scared to hear her response to his confession, worried that she might not feel the same way. Just as Ori is about to say something back, the moment is completely ruined when her long-lost father, Kyosuke, who never returned from the supermarket, suddenly walks in, casually asking about Yuriko as if he hadn't been gone forever. He immediately turns his attention to Miyamura, completely ignoring everything else, and compliments his piercings like he's the coolest guy in town. Before he can say anything else, Ori shuts him down with a swift kick, making him drop his cigarette in shock. Kyosuke decides to interrogate Miyamura like a protective father should. He starts off by asking if Miyamura has any siblings, and upon hearing that he's an only child, jokingly tells him to stay away from Ori. However, he immediately takes it back, laughing and admitting that he's just messing around. As they continue talking, Miyamura asks why Ori calls her own father by his first name Ori, and Kyosuke just reminds him that Ori is actually their family name, suggesting that maybe Miyamura should start calling her Kyoko instead. But then, he immediately contradicts himself, saying that it'd be way too weird to suddenly switch names now. Eventually, Kyosuke gets straight to the point and asks Ori if Miyamura is actually her boyfriend. Unlike before, when she would have been too flustered to answer, she confidently says yes this time. Kyosuke pretends to be devastated, claiming he just can't accept their relationship because Miyamura's hair is too long. Miyamura, wanting to be respectful, says he'll cut it if that's what it takes, but Kyosuke, suddenly changing his mind again, tells him not to waste it and suggests just tying it back instead. Then he asks if Miyamura is really sure about dating Ori, and without hesitation, Miyamura responds that he loves her. Before the conversation can get any deeper, Yuriko walks in and casually jokes that they don't have enough food for Kyosuke. Later, as they walk together, Ori apologizes for how ridiculous her dad is, but Miyamura just laughs, saying that Kyosuke isn't all that different from her. Feeling touched by his words, Ori quietly takes his hand, and for the first time, they share a peaceful moment without any interruptions. Miyamura admits that there's still so much he doesn't know about her, but he really wants to learn if she'll let him. Soon after, they reach the main road, and Miyamura decides to head home from there, thanking her for everything. As he walks away, Ori suddenly feels an overwhelming wave of emotions and quickly runs off before her Niagara Falls begins to rain. Meanwhile, Miyamura, left standing alone, finally understands just how difficult it is to say goodbye to someone you love and how fast a heart can beat when it's truly in love. On the other side of town, Toru is at home working on some math problems, but his mind isn't really in it. Instead, he finds himself thinking about how, at one point, he used to be the closest person to Ori. The next day, Sakura, watching from the window, immediately picks up on the fact that Toru isn't acting like himself. Just then, Ayasaki shows up, asking who she's staring at. Flustered, Sakura rushes off to the student council room, but Ayasaki isn't letting this go so easily. She insists that Sakura tell her what's going on, and as Sakura looks at her, noticing how her body type is so similar to Ori's, insecurities start creeping in. She convinces herself that Toru will never fall for someone like her, and frustrated with her own thoughts, leaves without explaining anything. However, as she walks away, she realizes that no matter what she feels about herself, Ayasaki has always been there for her, never once judging her. Gathering her courage, she rushes back and finally admits that she likes someone but isn't confident about how she looks. Seeing Sakura, usually so calm and composed, blushing and flustered, Ayasaki can't help but smile and tell her she actually looks cute, making Sakura feel just a little bit better. Later, Ori and Miyamura run into Toru and Shu. While Shu keeps Ori busy with English questions, Toru takes the chance to patch things up with Miyamura. Later, as Miyamura studies, Ori mentions that Sota made a friend named Isumi, which is also Miyamura's first name. When Miyamura asks her to call him that too, she immediately scolds him for making things weird. The next morning, Sota asks Kyosuke how long he plans to stay, but Kyosuke causally brushes off the question like it doesn't even matter. Later, when Yuriko asks him the same thing, he dramatically wonders if there's even a place for him in this house anymore, acting as if he got pumped and dumped by his own family. Just then, Ori comes home from school with Miyamura, and the moment Kyosuke lays eyes on him, he doesn't even recognize the poor guy. Seeing how Miyamura is already sweating from just existing, Kyosuke decides that the best solution is to drag him into the bath with him. Despite Miyamura's protests, Kyosuke shoves him straight into the bath, and the next thing Ori hears is her father screaming his lungs out, probably convinced Miyamura is secretly part of the Yakuza because of his tattoos. Later, as the evening rolls in, Miyamura realizes it's already past 8 p.m. and thinks it's time for him to head home, but the family insists that he stay over. Somehow, this results in Miyamura and Kyosuke sharing a room for the night, and instead of just letting the poor guy sleep, Kyosuke decides to interrogate him about his daughter. When Miyamura explains how Ori doesn't judge people based on appearances, Kyosuke, feeling oddly touched by this revelation, just passes out right then and there like he's had some kind of spiritual awakening. The next morning, Miyamura wakes up to Ori barging into the room wearing gym clothes, pulling up the curtains without a shred of mercy. Soon enough, the two of them get ready and start heading to school together, completely unaware that some of their classmates happen to see them leaving the house at the same time. As expected, word spreads like wildfire, and before they know it, they are out here getting shipped harder than Amazon packages. Toru and Yuki are both incredibly annoyed that they have to listen to people talk nonsense about their best friends, though Yuki takes it a little harder than necessary. Meanwhile, Ori finds herself dealing with a bunch of guys she had previously rejected, while Miyamura does his best to keep a low profile and avoid unnecessary attention. The next day, Miyamura walks into class, only to be met with a sea of shocked faces, and when he stops next to Ori, she can't believe her eyes because he's cut his hair short. Instantly, the BTS fangirls in the class start drooling over him like he's suddenly the hottest thing they've seen after V. But before they can get too bold, one cold glare from Ori is enough to remind them that Miyamura's cakes belong to her. Meanwhile, Shu, the king of unnecessary theatrics, reacts as if the world is ending. And just as he's handing Miyamura a CD, Toru notices a girl sneakily taking a picture of Miyamura with her phone. Later, when Miyamura and Ori arrive home, he gets yet another over-the-top reaction because of his new hair. As they run into Shindu, he starts crying like he's mourning the death of the old Miyamura. After wiping away his imaginary tears, Shindu excitedly reveals that he recently won a giant bag of candy in some contest and wants to share it with them. As they sift through the different flavors, Miyamura learns that Shindu absolutely despises the cheese-flavored ones, so naturally he makes him eat one just for the laughs. As Shindu turns away, crying over the horrible taste, Ori tries a candy that tastes like literal clay and immediately regrets it. Before she can even react, Miyamura casually steals it right out of her mouth and leaves the room to get some water for Shindu. The following day, Miyamura notices a girl staring at him with a face full of resentment, but for the life of him, he has no idea who she is. Meanwhile, as Ori and Yuki walk through the hallway, the same girl suddenly appears and demands confirmation about the rumors. Once she gets her answer, she bolts away and starts stalking Miyamura like some kind of horror movie villain. When Miyamura finally stops and confronts her, she straight up asks him when he's going to break up with Ori, to which he responds, without hesitation, never. That's when she introduces herself as Sawada from class 2 to 5 and dramatically vows to return as if she's some anime villain planning her next move. Later, as Miyamura tells Ori about the strange encounter, Sawada appears once again, acting all high and mighty. However, before she can get too confident, Ori quickly reminds her exactly who she's dealing with, which leaves Sawada completely flustered. It turns out she isn't actually in love with Miyamura, she's just madly obsessed with Ori. Toru, who has been eavesdropping on the whole conversation, immediately jumps in just to enjoy the chaos. Ori, already exhausted, begs Miyamura to save her from Sawada's relentless grip, but no matter how hard he tries, she keeps pulling Ori right back. As the battle for Ori's affection rages on, Toru, finding the whole situation way too entertaining, decides to text Yuki, telling her to come and witness it firsthand. Sawada refuses to let go of Ori until the class bell rings, forcing Miyamura to physically drag her to class. After school, as Miyamura walks out alone, he is once again startled by Sawada, who, despite everything, is still determined to find Ori. When she learns that Ori went home early, she starts following Miyamura like a shadow. They take the exact same route, walk into the exact same building, enter the exact same elevator, and that's when they both realize that they're actually next-door neighbors. As if things couldn't get weirder, Sawada suddenly remembers she left her key in her school locker. So Miyamura invites her inside and offers her some cake. As they chat, she asks if he ever gets visitors, and he admits that even Ori doesn't come over often. Curious, she asks if he has any siblings, and Miyamura says he's the only child. Sawada, laughing at his misery, mentions that she assumed he had a little sister because of how well he handled things, which sends Miyamura into a fit of laughter. However, the mood shifts when Sawada gets a little sad and mentions she used to have a brother. Just as quickly, though, she takes it back, claiming she was just joking. Not long after, her parents call, telling her to return home, and before she leaves, Miyamura casually tells her she's welcome to drop by any time. Later that night, Miyamura's mother mentions that Sawada's older brother actually passed away in an accident last year, leaving him deep in thought as he falls asleep. The next day, Miyamura notices that she's back to following him again and tries to tell her off, but when a couple of guys start teasing her, she immediately latches onto Miyamura for protection. Without a word, Miyamura shoots the boys a cold glare, scaring them off instantly, and the two decide to wait for Ori together. Later that evening, as Ori and Miyamura watch a movie at her place, they come across a scene where a girl plans to kill her own father. Without missing a beat, Ori turns to Kyosuke and tells him she relates to the character, scaring him so badly that he immediately runs out to buy cigarettes. Seizing the moment, Ori questions why Miyamura never makes a move on her, not realizing that he has no idea she's waiting for him to take the lead. Just as he leans in for a kiss, Kyosuke bursts back in, asking for change, completely ruining the moment. A few days later, he notices his change in mood. Wanting to cheer him up, She pulls him toward the magazine section and starts showing him the ones he likes, hoping to lift his spirits. The next day, Yuki asks Toru to help her take out the trash. Toru, feeling bad about what happened, rushes off to grab a towel while Yuki stays behind and apologizes for the mess. As they talk, Sakura casually asks Yuki if she and Toru are dating. Yuki quickly waves off and Toru returns with a jacket, offering it to Sakura so she can cover up the stain. At first, Sakura gets flustered because he admits that he isn't the strongest or the bravest guy around, but being with her gives him the push to do things he otherwise wouldn't, making him feel like less of a loser. Hearing this, Sakura reflects on her own situation and realizes that Ayasaki gives her courage too, and something seems off but decides not to bother her. The next day, she asks why she and Toru haven't been hanging out as much, but Yuki brushes it off, jokingly saying that Toru has been too busy eating cookies to have time for her. She covers up her feelings with a smile, but Ori can tell that something is bothering her. She realizes that Yuki tends to hesitate when it comes to going after the things she wants, always waiting too long until they slip out of reach. And in hopes if, and even though she happily accepts them, she later eats them in misery knowing she'll never be as busty as Sakura. Later, she randomly asks Miyamura to teach her how to bake a cake. Miyamura, slightly confused but willing to help, gives her some basic instructions. A week later, she returns with a batch of cupcakes, but unfortunately, they're completely burnt. She asks Miyamura and Ori not to say anything to Toru. Days later, everyone finds out that Miyamura is out of town visiting his relatives and won't be back for a whole week. That night, Miyamura texts Ori to let her know he arrived safely, but soon realizes his phone battery is about to die. Unfortunately, he left his charger at home, meaning he won't be able to contact her at all. Meanwhile, Ori anxiously waits for his messages. He bolts out of his house to find her, and the two finally meet in front of the elevator. Ori doesn't hesitate for a second and pulls him into a tight hug, overwhelmed with relief. At that moment, she truly understands how. The next day, the girl Miyamura absolutely hates horror movies. The other girls immediately start giving her advice on how she can use that to make him give her back shots, so she decides to put their suggestions to the test the next time he comes over to watch a movie. However, all their advice ends up backfiring spectacularly, leaving Miyamura more terrified than ever. Feeling embarrassed, Ori flops onto her bed, lamenting her failed attempts to score some action. But Miyamura reassures her that he fell in love with her just the way she is, making her realize that she never needed to try so hard in the first place. As they watch the rain pour outside, Ori asks him to stay the night, and the two end up unlocking the DLC. The next morning, Sota sees Miyamura still at the house and bursts into tears, but Miyamura simply embraces him and reassures him that no matter what happens, she's not going anywhere. Ori overhears their conversation from the hallway and smiles, knowing that she let the right person into her chamber of secrets. One evening, Miyamura reflects on how much his life has changed compared to the past. Back then, he was a wannabe Itachi Uchiha, dreading break periods that only reminded him of his isolation. Group projects were torture, forcing him to interact when all he wanted was to dwell in his basement like a Discord mod. Every school day felt miserable, leaving him with no good memories. At his lowest, he even considered ending it all, but looking at where he is now, he's grateful he held on. He found real friends, people who actually cared, and more than anything, he met Ori, the one person who let him hit it from the back like he always wanted. Meanwhile, Ayasaki reflects on Sengoku and how much of a pushover he used to be. He let people walk all over him, laughing along just to fit in, yet never truly feeling like he belonged. The attention sometimes made him happy, but more often than not, it only made him anxious. Despite this, he always tried to push himself, especially for Ayasaki's sake, something she genuinely appreciated. She loved having him around, knowing how much he had changed since they first met. Back in school, Ayasaki once overheard Sengoku dismissing a comment about her being cute, calling her average at best. Later, he awkwardly tried to change the subject by showing her the book he was reading. When he learned she loved books too, he brought her another one the next day, even offering it to Sakura once Ayasaki was done reading. A few days later, he shared more books, revealing that his family had an entire library. Intrigued, Ayasaki mentioned how cool that was, prompting Sengoku to invite her over. During her visit, she found an old book about the apocalypse and started flipping through it. When Sengoku asked how she'd spend her last day if the world were ending, she instantly replied that she'd eat every dessert possible. As they chatted, he suddenly complimented her ponytails, making her feel unexpectedly warm inside. The next day, she returned the books, and their end-of-the-world discussions continued. Sengoku randomly mentioned that his friend Kanioka had a crush on her, but Ayasaki brushed it off and asked if she could visit again. Later in the library, Sengoku was picking out books for Ayasaki when she suddenly asked what he would actually do if the world ended tomorrow. Without thinking, he blurted out that he'll confess his feelings to her before turning into dust. His face turned bright red, and Ayasaki, realizing what he meant, simply smiled and told him she liked him too. From that moment on, their bond deepened, and as they kept reading together, they eventually fell in love. At present, Ori is painting Miyamura's toenails and keeps teasing him like an annoying girlfriend. Knowing full well she retaliates, he jokingly puts his foot on her head, only to drop to his knees and apologize immediately. Ori tells him it's fine, pointing out how aggressive he is with the boys yet so gentle with her. She tells him not to hold back, making Miyamura question if she secretly enjoys getting slammed like a WWE wrestler. The thought sends Ori's mind spiraling, and before she knows it, she's blushing at the idea of Miyamura being a kinky gorilla. The next day, Miyamura enters the classroom acting oddly cheerful, making Toru and Shu suspicious. When Sengoku arrives to borrow his math notebook, he also notices something is off. Turns out, Miyamura is trying to practice being overly nice to the boys so he can work up the courage to yell at Ori for once. Later, when he and Ori are alone in an empty classroom, he tries to act aggressive, but just as he's about to pull it off, a group of girls walks in and immediately assumes he's being abusive. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the hallway, Yuki has a conversation that leaves her looking uneasy. Later, as Miyamura and Ori discuss rumors about their violent love story, they notice Yuki seems distracted. When they ask what's wrong, she reveals that someone recently asked her out, but she has no idea how to turn him down. She doesn't even know much about the guy, but she has to admit he's confident. Not wanting to hurt his feelings, Ori suggests that Yuki pretend to date Toru for a few days till the guy will back off. Yuki hesitates, worried Toru will hate the idea, but Miyamura calls him up immediately. And to her surprise, Toru agrees to play along. Later, Yuki reveals that the guy who asked her out is Yanagi from Class 6. Toru suggests she find someone better looking for the role, but Yuki reassures him that he's actually hotter than Yanagi. With that, Toru grabs her hand, and they walk outside to meet Yanagi while Ori and Miyamura watch from the balcony. When Yanagi finally shows up, he apologizes for being late, explaining that his teacher needed him. The moment Ori and Miyamura see him, they're stunned to see that he's ridiculously attractive. Toru feels self-conscious knowing all too well he is leagues behind Yanagi, but fortunately for him, Yanagi assumes Yuki is already dating Toru and leaves with a smile. The second he's gone, Ori rushes down to Yuki, demanding to know why she rejected such a beautiful man. Yuki simply shrugs, saying she's not into guys like that, though in reality, she's just hiding her feelings for Toru. Later, Ayasaki tells Yuki that while Yanagi may be incredibly attractive, his eyesight is so bad that he's basically blind, often bumping into walls like an idiot. Curious, Yuki approaches Yanagi and suggests he must have mistaken her for Ori, who is way more attractive. Yanagi, however, confidently replies that he wasn't mistaken at all, and he's actually had a crush on her for a while now. The next day, Ori decides to mess with her favorite punching bag, also known as her boyfriend, so she decides to braid Miyamura's hair just to see how he reacts. Of course, a bunch of girls come up to him, complimenting his new look. Now, normally, Miyamura wouldn't pay much attention, but the moment he so much as acknowledges their existence, Ori immediately gets pissed off and smacks him. Without giving him a reason, she storms out of the classroom, leaving him standing there completely lost. However, just as she's about to disappear from view, Miyamura catches Mizochi, one of their classmates, watching the whole thing unfold with a weird look on his face. Not wanting to make things worse, he quickly chases after Ori to try and calm her down, only for her to explode into a full-blown tantrum about how those same girls who are now being all nice to him were the ones who treated him like an NPC before he got his new haircut. As they're walking and Ori continues venting, they pass by Tanihara, the same guy who used to be a villain who constantly pestered Miyamura and even told Shindu to stop being friends with him. Turns out, some things never change because Tanihara and his friend immediately start picking who constantly pestered Miyamura, and to make things worse, They even throw some mean comments Ori's way. Unfortunately for him, he's an idiot, and Ori, who was already on edge, takes all of her built-up frustration out on him, absolutely wrecking him on the spot. After that, she finally feels satisfied. Later that day, Shindu goes to grab some food at a restaurant when he unexpectedly runs into Tanihara, who now looks like he just got out of a street fight with his face all bruised up. Naturally, Shindu asks what happened, and Tanihara, still in disbelief, explains that he ran into Miyamura, and out of nowhere, his crazy girlfriend gave him a beatdown for messing with him. When Tanihara asks who that girl even was, Shindu tells him that it was none other than Ori, and warns him not to try anything funny with Miyamura again unless he wants to get bodied. Meanwhile, Miyamura is at Ori's place helping her wash dishes when she suddenly notices he's looking kind of down, so she asks him what's up and tells him to cheer up. Just having someone who actually cares about him is enough to make Miyamura feel better, and for a moment, he forgets about everything else. The next day, Ori is back at it again, begging Miyamura to be a little rougher with her like he was last time, but he keeps refusing. Just then, Shindu suddenly shows up out of nowhere, startling Miyamura. Jokingly, he says he just couldn't sit back and watch a girl as pretty as Ori beg for something like this, and Ori, playing along, complains that Miyamura doesn't love her anymore, making the situation even funnier. Shindo, taking it a step further, tries to get all 30 with Ori just to mess with Miyamura, but she immediately shoots him down with the coldest, most uninterested expression ever. Miyamura tells Ori they should get going, but she insists that he should make her move. Giving in, Miyamura finally grabs her hand and aggressively pulls her along, scolding Shindu as they leave, leaving the poor guy completely confused about what just happened. Meanwhile, Tanihara and his crew are wandering around near a convenience store when they spot Ori approaching, and the moment they see her, they all start internally panicking. One of the guys who hasn't met her before tries to talk trash, only for his own friends to immediately shut him up like. In a desperate attempt to avoid another beatdown, the guys start pretending to pick up trash from the street, hoping Ori doesn't see them as a threat. Tanihara mutters that Ori is an absolute menace, but then, to his horror, he sees Miyamura casually slapping her, and she actually likes it. On the other hand, Tanihara is still struggling to process how Miyamura, the same guy he used to clown on back then, is now somehow bagging girls. As Miyamura and Ori arrive home, Sota announces he's heading out, and Kyosuke reminds him to be back by dinner. Seizing the opportunity, Miyamura asks Kyosuke for some relationship advice, and for some reason, the man decides that the best place to have a heart-to-heart is in the bathroom. There, Miyamura explains how Ori has this strange obsession with being treated badly, and Kyosuke suggests it's because Miyamura is always too nice to her. Since she's already seen the good, she now wants to see the bad side, so basically, she is creating that bad boy energy. The next day, Toru tells Miyamura how he went to karaoke with Shu, but all the guy did was sing P. Diddy songs, making it a weird experience. At that moment, their classmate Mizochi buys a drink from the vending machine but doesn't even bother saying hi, making Miyamura suspect he's avoiding them because he has a thing for Ori. Later, Miyamura realizes he left his phone in the science lab, and when he goes back to get it, he runs into Mizochi, who helps him search for it. After a while, they realize the phone was in Miyamura's back pocket the entire time, leaving Mizochi frustrated. That night, Tanihara has a bizarre dream where he and Miyamura are trapped in a small room surrounded by rabbits, and when he wakes up, he suddenly wants Miyamura's number. After getting it from a friend, he calls, but Miyamura doesn't answer, making him think he's being ignored. The next day, he visits Miyamura's mother's bakery, but finds out they're about to close, so he decides to come back later. Before leaving, he mentions the call, and Miyamura reveals his phone was broken, meaning he wasn't ignoring him after all. Seeing Miyamura's kind smile as he says goodbye, Tanihara starts realizing maybe the guy isn't as lame as he always thought. One day, the weather starts getting colder as the days go by, and Ori decides to start wearing a scarf to keep warm. Just then, they run into Tanihara, who casually says hi, and for some reason, Ori starts throwing hands at him because she's just mad that Tanihara has been getting a little too friendly with Miyamura lately. Tanihara quickly assures her that he and Miyamura aren't nearly as close as she's imagining and tells her she should be keeping an eye on Shindu instead, since that man practically spends half his nights at Miyamura's place. Right on cue, Shindu himself appears out of nowhere, proudly boasting about all the times Miyamura has stayed over at his place like they're a married couple. Sensing that things are about to get violent, Tanihara quickly yanks Shindu away before Ori gives him a reason to file for insurance. Once they're gone, Ori starts overthinking, suddenly worried that some random guy might steal Miyamura from her, and tells him that if he ever decides to fall for someone else, it better be a girl and not a dude. The next day at school, Miyamura walks up to the boys and tells them to keep their distance from him or Ori will haunt their dreams. One evening, Yuki is out shopping with her little sister when she unexpectedly runs into Yanagiya, who's finally decided to wear glasses. Curious, he asks her what she's doing, and Yuki explains that she's picking up some art supplies for her sister. A moment later, her sister appears, and Yuki introduces her to Yanagiya. She immediately asks if the two of them are dating, but gets disappointed when she learns Yuki dumped such a pretty guy. Embarrassed, Yuki apologizes for her sister's bluntness, but Yanagiya doesn't seem to mind. In fact, he's actually happy to see her outside of school for once. However, not wanting to stir up any unnecessary drama with Toru, he quickly excuses himself. However, Yuki gets all sad that her relationship with Toru was merely a lie. Later, she meets up with Ayasaki and tells her that Sakura asked her if she and Toru were really dating, and Yuki couldn't bring herself to tell her the truth. She wants Ayasaki to tell her the truth, but Ayasaki refuses because she knows Yuki wants to get clapped by Toru. Recalling her conversation with Sakura, Yuki remembers how her lips trembled as she hesitated to answer, which just made her want to come clean even more. After Ayasaki leaves, Yuki is left to drown in her own despair, knowing that Toru only sees her as a friend. She reminisces about the first time he held her hand, even though it was all part of their fake act, and remembers how she selfishly asked him to keep it up for just a little while longer. Deep down, she had been hoping that if they kept pretending, Toru would eventually develop real feelings for her, but now she realizes how messed up that thinking was. A few days later, Ori and the others notice that Yuki hasn't been coming to school. While Miyamura assumes she's just sick, Ori isn't convinced since Yuki hasn't even responded to any of their messages. Meanwhile, at home, Yuki's little sister keeps nagging her to go back to school, but Yuki just stays silent. Seeing her like this, her sister reminds her of how she always holds back instead of asking for the things she wants and tells her she should start speaking her mind. To lighten the mood, she also tells Yuki to keep baking cookies and cupcakes because the last batch she made was surprisingly decent. After thinking things over, Yuki finally decides to turn on her phone and is immediately bombarded with a ridiculous number of messages from her friends. As she scrolls through them, she comes across one from Toru. In it, he casually mentions that Sakura confessed to him. The second she reads it, her whole world stops. Despite the gut-wrenching feeling in her chest, she tells herself to move on and resolves to return to school the next day. She acts normal around Ori, pretending like nothing is wrong, but Toru isn't buying it. Sensing that something is up, he pulls her aside for a private chat on the school rooftop. Yuki assumes this is the moment where he'll finally tell her they don't need to keep up their fake relationship anymore, but instead, he brings up Sakura's confession. He reveals that Sakura actually told him not to answer right away because she still believes he's dating Yuki. Frustrated, Yuki asks why he didn't just clear up the misunderstanding, to which Toru responds that he didn't think it really mattered. Feeling bold, she then asks him if he would have ever considered dating her if they weren't pretending. Toru, caught off guard, awkwardly admits that he thinks she's out of his league. Trying to change the topic, Toru asks why she hasn't been baking any cookies lately, but Yuki's mind is too preoccupied with other thoughts. She reflects on how Sakura had slowly mustered up the courage to confess to him after baking him cookies, while she, on the other hand, had only been running away from her true feelings. The idea of Toru being with Sakura makes her heart ache, but what scares her even more is the thought that he might never understand how much she truly likes him. As the conversation drifts, Toru mentions how it's the coldest day of the year and that he's hoping for snow. Yuki reminds him that snow also means they'll have to deal with the pain of shoveling later, but Toru just keeps passionately defending his love for the snow. Watching him get so worked up over something so simple actually makes Yuki feel warm inside, and for a brief moment, she forgets about her sadness. Meanwhile, Sengoku starts suspecting that Sakura has a boyfriend since she's been in such a good mood lately. Ayasaki tells him it's actually the opposite before walking off without further explanation. Later, as Sengoku is cleaning the student council room, Sakura walks in with a bright smile, looking noticeably more cheerful than usual. She approaches the window, glancing outside, and suddenly notices Yuki handing a drink to Toru. For a second, she completely spaces out, the smile disappearing from her face. Sakura turns on her heel and quietly starts to leave, but Sengoku, picking up on her shift in mood, stops her and asks what's wrong. She confesses that she was rejected before she even had the chance to properly ask her crush out. Sengoku, taken aback, doesn't know what to say at first, but as he tries to offer her some words of encouragement, Sakura, unable to hold back anymore, finally breaks down, letting out all the emotion she had been holding in. One day, Hiro realizes that most of them are only children, but Toru catches everyone off guard by revealing that Shu actually has a younger sibling. A few days earlier, Shu had invited Toru over to his place, and Toru was left speechless when he discovered that Shu had a younger sister. On top of that, he was acting super composed in front of her, as opposed to his usual clown-like behavior. Just as they're discussing this, Shu bursts into the room, hiked up and asking if they want to grab burger fries after school, only to get immediately scolded by the girls for his usual reckless enthusiasm. Later, they all meet up with Yanagi, and Ori notes he always speaks super formally to everyone except Yuki. Just the other day, Ayasaki had been pestering Yanagi to say goodbye to her, but he looked visibly uncomfortable, yet when Yuki passed by, he casually told her he'd see her later. Seeing this, Shu suggests that Yanagi start calling everyone by their first names to break his overly stiff habit. Yanagi hesitates since he's never addressed any of his friends so casually before, and when Shu keeps pushing, Toru decides to physically knock some sense into him. Yanagi acknowledges that the way he talks makes him feel distant from the group, and even though it's hard for him, he genuinely wants to be closer to them. Just then, Sengoku walks in, casually calling them a weird bunch, so Miyamura and Toru jump at the chance to point out how Sengoku acts way too relaxed around them despite knowing them for only a short time. As the boys keep goofing off, Ori decides to leave them to their nonsense. Watching them fool around, Yanagi finally musters up the courage to call Toru by his first name. Shu immediately demands the same treatment, but Yanagi insists on taking things one step at a time. Later, Yanagi and Miyamura get into a dumb argument and turn to Sakura for an opinion. She quickly realizes they're fighting over who's taller and just tells them both to apologize to each other. Yanagi immediately says sorry, which somehow annoys Miyamura because he wanted to apologize first. They start bickering again, and Sakura finds their childish antics oddly amusing. The next day, Miyamura asks Sawada how she feels about Sengoku and Toru, and she casually replies that they seem normal. Miyamura then explains that he's trying to help her get more comfortable around guys, so he, Sengoku, and Toru start bribing her with snacks, turning it into a competition to see who she warms up to first. Just then, Ori and Shu arrive, with Shu being his usual loud self, immediately causing Sawada to panic. Shu asks Miyamura to put in a good word for him, but even after Miyamura reassures her, Sawada still refuses to acknowledge Shu's existence. Later, Shu starts complaining that his throat feels sore but brushes it off as no big deal. Ori checks on him and realizes he has a fever, immediately forcing him to go home. On his way out, he bumps into Sawada, who's struggling to carry a heavy box of science equipment. Without saying much, he grabs the box and drops it off in the science lab before walking away. Sawada, confused, tries to thank him, but Shu doesn't stick around, worried she might catch his cold. Now Sawada is convinced he's mad at her. The next day, Shu is back at school, feeling fine, but he has no idea that Sawada is spying on him from behind a door. Sakura catches her and asks what she's doing, and Sawada admits she thinks Shu is angry at her. Sakura, however, points out that she's never actually seen Shu mad at anyone and reassures her that she's overthinking it. Just then, Shu steps out of the room and, as usual, starts loudly chatting away upon seeing Sawada. She immediately panics and calls him annoying before sprinting off again. As Shu wonders aloud why she always runs away, Sakura notices Sawada peeking at him from behind a wall, clear proof that she's slowly warming up to him. Meanwhile, Shu's younger sister, Moto, has been hoping to enroll in East High, but she finds out her grades aren't good enough. When her teacher tells her to aim for a different school, she gets really upset and locks herself in her room. When Shu gets home, she refuses to come out or even eat dinner. Eventually, she tells him what happened, and Shu, in a rather calm fashion, tells her that bad grades are no excuse for starving herself. He asks which school she applied to, but Moto hesitates, worried that he'll just laugh at her. After some pushing, she finally admits she wanted to get into East High, but doesn't have the grades for it. When Shu asks if her scores are really that bad, Moto immediately tries to punch him out of frustration. He catches her fist and points out that her books are practically falling apart from how much she studies, so she's clearly working hard. He tells her he knows how much effort she puts in and jokingly asks which teacher crushed her dreams so he can teach them a lesson. Moto finally breaks down, admitting that no matter how much she studies, her scores don't improve, and watching all her friends easily qualify for top schools makes her feel left behind. After venting, she finally calms down, and Shu drags her to the dinner table. The next day, Shu asks Ori for a favor and sends Moto over to her house so she can help her study. Ori reflects on how different Shu acted when talking about his sister, realizing that despite his usual clownish behavior, he's actually a responsible older brother. Later, Ori brings Moto some hot chocolate and comments on how much she resembles Shu. Moto laughs, saying that not only do they look alike, but they also share the same brooding and reserved personality. Ori is stunned because, in school, Shu is nothing but loud and annoying. Meanwhile, Sota asks Miyamura who the green-haired girl is, and Miyamura explains that she's Shu's sister. To make her feel welcome, they bake banana cupcakes for her. As Moto slowly gets more comfortable around Ori, she mentions how everyone in her class has cell phones, but she only ever uses hers to text Shu. Ori asks if they're close, and Moto admits that Shu constantly messages her even when they're in the same house. Meanwhile, Shu picks out a good luck charm for Moto, hoping to boost her confidence before her exams. As Christmas gets closer, Kyosuke asks Ori to invite Miyamura over for the holiday, but when she brings it up, Miyamura tells her he'll be too busy working at his family's bakery and probably won't make it. Ori doesn't want to pressure him, so she says it's fine. But Kyosuke and Sota aren't having any of it and keep pushing him to come over until he gets so overwhelmed that he straight up runs away just to escape them. Meanwhile, Toru is out with Shu and Sengoku when he starts rambling about his crush on Ori, and in the middle of his non-stop talking, he accidentally lets it slip that he and Yuki aren't actually dating. Sengoku immediately gets mad because Sakura had cried in front of him about it, but before he can get too worked up, Toru admits that he actually does like Yuki, which makes Sengoku tell him that as long as they're both fine with staying a hopeless virgin, he should just go with it. The next day, Yuki randomly asks Toru if she can come over to play games, and he agrees after acting like an idiot. Yuki, confused but still down, shows up at his place, but once inside, Toru starts acting sketchy and tells her to be quiet, making her think he's trying to avoid his parents. Then, to make things even weirder, he locks the door and takes off his tie, which makes Yuki freak out because she thinks he's trying to swipe her V card. Noticing she's uncomfortable, Toru sighs and unlocks the door, telling her to relax because he's not about to do anything weird. Yuki is still flustered and tells him she feels safe around him, which makes both of them turn red. Right at that moment, Toru's mom barges in, but he desperately tries to keep the door shut to stop her from seeing Yuki. She refuses to back down, so Yuki awkwardly offers to leave, but Toru firmly tells her to stay. When the woman finally steps inside, she happily greets Yuki and then leaves to get them snacks, only for Toru to casually reveal that it isn't his mom, it is their housekeeper, Yashiro, who always bombards him with annoying questions about Yuki, which is why he was trying to avoid her. Before he can even breathe, Yashiro walks back in to ask if they want shortcake or cheesecake, and when Yuki picks cheesecake, she gives Toru a knowing look and warns him not to try anything funny. Toru shrugs it off, saying he wouldn't even touch Yuki while she's here, which makes Yuki wonder if he actually would if they were alone. After calming down, they play video games until Yashiro returns with some cake and tea, and they immediately realize she bought it from Miyamura's bakery. Meanwhile, Sengoku, who has been getting hounded by Aosaki to visit her for Christmas, refuses to go, and when she dramatically starts crying about it, Ori and Toru chew him out. When they ask why he won't go, he awkwardly admits that her room is filled with framed dead insects, and he's terrified of them. Later, Yuriko asks Ori for her grade sheet and is proud when she sees Ori scored mostly A's. She also points out that the next time she gets her grades, she'll be graduating, which makes Ori realize how fast time has flown and leads her thinking about the future. On Christmas Eve, Yanagi bumps into Yuki's sister, and when she notices he isn't wearing glasses, he explains that he switched to contacts, which makes her consider getting some too. Yanagia offers to help her pick some out, so they walk off together. Elsewhere, Tanihara is bickering with his brother, Toru is hanging out with Yuki, and Shu is helping Moto study for her entrance exams. Sengoku still refuses to visit Ayasaki's place while Sakura tries to change his mind. Shindu is feeling down because Chika will graduate a year before him, but Chika reassures him that he'll wait. At Ori's place, her family is bummed that Miyamura couldn't make it but are happy when he later shows up to drop off their cake. The second he arrives, they all urge him to stay and eat with them, and even though Miyamura insists he really has to go, they keep pressuring him until Ori has to physically walk him outside. As they step out, Ori, still lost in thought about graduation, suddenly says she feels like she still doesn't know enough about Miyamura despite wanting to, which reminds him of when he once said the same thing about her. She then admits she wants to keep dating him even after graduation, and before she can say anything else, Miyamura just casually drops a marriage proposal on her. Ori is so stunned that Miyamura, realizing what he just did, panics and tries to run, but she stops him and promises to make him happy for the rest of their lives. They share a sweet moment, but it's cut short when Miyamura gets a call from his mom and has to rush back to the bakery, leaving Ori standing outside in the freezing cold, still processing what just happened. As graduation approaches, Yuki and Ori talk about the upcoming ceremony, and Ori notices that Yuki is keeping all her stuff in the locker instead of taking it home. As she helps her clean up, Toru jokes that Ori is acting like Yuki's mom, but then realizes he and the others also have way too much stuff, so they dump their mess on Ori too. Just then, Shu walks in and Ori is surprised to see him empty-handed, only to find out that he's been taking his things home little by little. However, he reminds them that he's lent out a bunch of DVDs to Miyamura and Yuki, which they completely forgot to return. Since Ori doesn't have any stuff of her own to carry, they decide to make her haul their extra stuff, leaving her totally frustrated. Over the student council room, Sakura notices Ayasaki flipping through a travel magazine about a zoo. Yanagia and Sengoku walk in, and Ayasaki excitedly asks if they'd like to visit the zoo together. Sengoku realizes the zoo is far away, meaning it would require an overnight trip, a car, and a hotel. The idea excites Ayasaki, but when Yanagia asks why she's so insistent, she dodges the question and tries to escape. Before she can, Sakura grabs her and tickles her until she spills that she's scared that once they graduate, they'll all go their separate ways and forget about her. Sakura reassures her that they'll still be friends no matter what, and to cheer her up, Yanaji promises to take them on a road trip as soon as he gets his driver's license. Meanwhile, Ori is so exhausted from all the work at school that she ends up dozing off under the futon. When she calls for Miyamura in her sleep, he rushes to her and lets her rest her head on his lap. He notices she frowns in her sleep and jokes that she's going to get wrinkles. Watching her sleep so peacefully, he finds himself wishing for moments like this even after they graduate. Just then, he starts wondering how his life would be if he never met Ori. His mind drifts into an alternate reality where none of them became friends, and he remains the loner he used to be. Just as he gets lost in that thought, Ori wakes up, so he shares his feelings with her. She believes that everything happened exactly as it was meant to, calling it fate. Sitting on his lap, Miyamura reflects on all the good times and the friends he's made because of Ori. On graduation day, Sengoku delivers a speech as the student council president. But in the middle of it, Miyamura sneezes so loudly that the entire hall bursts into laughter, throwing Sengoku off completely. Furious that his speech got ruined, Sengoku chases Miyamura until he escapes to the rooftop. There he mentally bids farewell to his past self, the loner who never made any friends. As the ceremony ends, Sawada cries over not seeing Ori in school anymore, and Sakura and Toru have an awkward but heartfelt goodbye. Yuki overhears Sakura's words and feels sad that she'll leave without confessing her feelings. Later, Yanagia invites Yuki on the road trip, and outside, Kyosuke shows up to congratulate Miyamura, making everyone think he's his dad, which makes Ori absolutely lose it. Meanwhile, Shu and Moto leave together, and Miyamura walks home with Ori, holding her hand, realizing how much he once feared getting close to people, only to now be deeply in love with her. That's it for this video. Leave a like and comment which anime you want us to cover next. Thanks for watching, we'll see you in the next one.